The text message arrived at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that already felt like the longest day of my life. I was sitting in my pickup truck outside Henderson Construction, rain drumming against the windshield like angry fingers, when my phone buzzed with the sound that would change everything. My lover changed the locks. You're out. Let's see how tough you are now. Haha. Diana. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. 23 years of marriage, and this is how it ends, with a text message that reads like it was written by a vindictive teenager. My name is Patrick Owen, and I'm 55 years old. I've spent the last 30 years swinging hammers, reading blueprints, and turning other people's dreams into reality. I'm a construction foreman with calloused hands, a bad back, and apparently a wife who thinks I'm too stupid to see what's coming. The rain kept falling as I drove through the winding streets of Millbrook, Maine. This town has been my home since I was born, and I know every pothole, every shortcut, every secret that hides behind these white picket fences. Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everyone else's business, except sometimes you're the last to know your own. Diana's car wasn't in our driveway when I pulled up. Instead, there was a sleek black BMW that I recognized immediately. Theo West's car. Theo, the local real estate attorney with his perfect teeth and his expensive suits. The man who'd been coming around our house for months, supposedly helping Diana with some investment opportunities. My belongings were scattered across the front lawn like debris from a tornado. My toolbox sat in a puddle, my work boots thrown carelessly near the mailbox. 23 years of shared life reduced to a yard sale nobody wanted to attend. The front door opened before I could even get out of my truck. Diana appeared first, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the weather. She was wearing that red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Behind her, Theo emerged with a smug smile that made my fists clench involuntarily. "Well, well," Theo called out, his voice carrying that condescending tone that lawyers perfect in law school. "Look who finally showed up. You should have seen this coming, Owen." Diana crossed her arms and tilted her head with mock sympathy. "Patrick, honey, you can't say you're surprised. We've been growing apart for months." I climbed out of my truck slowly, deliberately. The rain soaked through my work shirt within seconds, but I didn't care. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, standing there next to her lover, and I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. "Growing apart," I repeated, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Diana said, but there was no real emotion in her voice. She was playing a part, and we all knew it. "I've filed the papers. Theo's handling everything." "Of course he is." I looked at Theo, who was practically preening with self-satisfaction. "Tell me, counselor, did you charge her your usual rate, or do you offer a friends and family discount?" Theo's smile faltered slightly. "There's no need for hostility, Patrick. This is just business." "Business." I nodded slowly, as if considering this. "Right. Well, then I guess I better start treating it like business." I walked to my toolbox and picked it up, ignoring the water that had pooled inside. My socket wrenches rattled like bones in a grave. Diana and Theo watched me gather my things, whispering to each other like conspirators at a funeral. "The lawyer will be in touch," Diana called out as I loaded the last of my belongings into my truck. "Don't try to make this difficult." I paused with my hand on the truck door and looked back at her. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Maybe she was remembering the man she married, the one who'd built this house with his own hands, who'd worked double shifts to pay for her pharmaceutical sales training, who'd never once raised his voice to her, even when she deserved it. Difficult? I smiled, and something in that expression made both of them take a step back. "Diana, sweetheart, you haven't seen difficult yet." I drove away without looking back, but I could feel them watching me in my rearview mirror. Let them think they'd won. Let them celebrate their victory. They had no idea what they'd just started. My phone buzzed again as I pulled into the parking lot of Murphy's Tavern. This time it was a text from my daughter, Rina. "Dad, I heard. Are you okay?" I sat in my truck for a long moment, watching the neon beer signs flicker in the windows of the bar. Then I typed back, "Phase 1. It's time." The response came immediately. "I've been waiting for this call for months." I smiled for the first time all day. Diana and Theo thought they were so clever, so careful in their planning. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was just another blue-collar fool who wouldn't fight back. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Murphy's Tavern smelled like stale beer, fried food, and broken dreams. It was exactly the kind of place where a man could disappear for a few hours and nobody would ask questions. I ordered a whiskey and found a corner booth where I could think. The bartender, Jimmy Murphy, had known me since high school. He set down my drink and lingered for a moment. "Heard about Diana," he said quietly. "Sorry, Pat." News travels fast in this town. "Ellen Morrison was in here an hour ago. Said she saw your stuff on the lawn." Jimmy shook his head. "That's a hell of a way to find out." Ellen Morrison. My neighbor, the unofficial town gossip, and surprisingly, one of the few people who'd never liked Diana. What else did Ellen have to say? That Diana's been bragging about her new boyfriend for weeks. Apparently, she's been telling anyone who'll listen that she's trading up. Jimmy's expression darkened. Also said that lawyer's been parking his fancy car in your driveway every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 months. Every Tuesday and Thursday. The days I worked late at the Henderson site. The days Diana always insisted she needed the house to herself for her conference calls with corporate. I'd been played, and played well. My phone buzzed. "Rina again. I'm at the apartment. Got everything ready." The apartment. Most people in town didn't know about my little insurance policy. 3 years ago, when Diana and I went through a rough patch, I'd quietly rented a small place above Kowalski's hardware store, just in case. Diana never knew about it, and I'd been using it as storage space and an occasional retreat when I needed to think. I finished my whiskey and headed out into the rain. Rina was waiting for me when I climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment. My daughter had inherited my dark hair and stubborn streak, but she'd gotten her mother's intelligence and her grandfather's gift for strategy. At 25, she was already making more money as a freelance IT consultant than I'd ever made swinging a hammer. "Dad," she said, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like vanilla perfume and determination. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry yet," I told her, pulling back to look at her face. "Be sorry for them." She smiled, and I saw a little bit of myself in that expression. "I've been doing some digging like you asked me to. Want to see what I found?" The apartment was small but comfortable. I'd furnished it with cast-offs and garage sale finds, but it had everything I needed. Rina had set up her laptop on the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and file folders. "Remember when Diana insisted on refinancing the house 5 years ago?" Rina asked, pulling up a document on her screen. "She said it was to get a better interest rate." I remember. I'd been suspicious then, but Diana had handled all the paperwork. She was better with numbers, she'd said. Better with legal documents. Well, she lied. Look at this. Rina turned the laptop toward me. She didn't just refinance. She restructured the entire mortgage as a commercial loan with something called a co-habitation clause. I leaned forward, studying the document. "English, please." "It means that if either party is removed from the deed or prevented from residing in the property, the full balance becomes due immediately. Not in 30 years, not in monthly payments. Immediately. with an 18% penalty interest rate. I stared at the screen, reading the fine print that Diana had obviously never bothered to examine. How much are we talking about? $237,000, due in full within 30 days of notice? The silence stretched between us as the implications sank in. Diana had been so eager to get me out of the house that she'd triggered a financial time bomb. "There's more," Rina said, clicking to another document. I hacked into Diana's email account. That's illegal. So is adultery in the state of Maine. So is fraud. So is forging someone's signature on legal documents. She gave me a look that was pure steel. Do you want to play by the rules, or do you want to win? I thought about Diana's mocking text message, about Theo's smug smile, about my belongings scattered on the lawn like garbage. Show me what you found. The emails painted a picture of a woman who'd been planning this betrayal for months. Diana had been corresponding with Theo about removing the obstacle and clearing the path for our future. She'd researched divorce law, asset protection, and how to hide money from a spouse. But the most damaging email was one she'd sent to her sister in California. "Patrick's too stupid to see what's coming. By the time he figures it out, Theo and I will own everything. The house, the business, all of it. He'll be lucky if he gets visitation rights with his own tools." She really wrote that? I asked. Screenshot, timestamp, metadata, all of it. Rina's fingers flew across the keyboard. But here's the best part. Look at this email from 3 days ago. It was from Theo to Diana. "Once we get him out, I'll handle the mortgage transfer. My firm has connections at the bank. This will be seamless." Diana's response, "You're brilliant. Patrick will never know what hit him." I leaned back in my chair and started laughing. I laughed until my sides hurt, until tears ran down my cheeks, until Rina looked genuinely concerned for my mental health. "Dad, you're scaring me a little." "They think they're so smart," I managed between gasps. "They think they've got it all figured out." "The mortgage company doesn't know about the separation yet," Rina said. "Diana and Theo probably think they have weeks to sort this out. How long do we have before they figure out what they've done?" "I'd say about 48 hours. Maybe less if Theo actually reads the documents instead of just rubber stamping them." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Kenny Kowalski answered on the second ring. "Pat? Jesus, I heard about Diana. You okay?" Kenny had been my best friend since we were 12 years old. He'd been my best man, Rina's godfather, and the one person I trusted completely. He was also an ex-repo man with a very flexible moral code and a talent for creative problem solving. "I'm better than okay," I told him. "I need a favor." "Name it." "How would you feel about helping me teach a lawyer some manners?" There was a pause, then Kenny's distinctive chuckle. "What did you have in mind?" "Meet me at Murphy's in an hour, and Kenny, bring your toolkit." After I hung up, Rina was staring at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "What are you planning?" "Phase 2, I said. "Your mother and her boyfriend want to play hardball? Let's show them what hardball really looks like." The rain had stopped by the time I left the apartment, but the air still crackled with electricity. A storm was coming, and it was going to be a big one. Kenny was already at Murphy's when I arrived, nursing a beer and chatting with Jimmy about the Red Sox. He looked up when I walked in, and I could see the anticipation in his eyes. Kenny had always been the kind of guy who enjoyed a good fight, especially when the odds were stacked against the underdog. "So," he said as I slid into the booth across from him, "what's the plan?" I filled him in on everything: the mortgage situation, the emails, Diana's betrayal, Theo's arrogance. Kenny listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. "That's cold, even for Diana," he said when I finished, "and I never liked that woman." The feeling was mutual. "So what do you want to do about it?" I leaned forward and lowered my voice. Theo drives that BMW like it's his firstborn child, parks it in my driveway twice a week like he owns the place. Kenny's grin was wicked. I see where this is going. Nothing permanent, nothing that can't be fixed, just enough to send a message. When? Tonight. Diana's got her book club on Wednesday nights. Theo usually shows up around 9, leaves around midnight. Book club. Kenny snorted. Is that what they're calling it? We spent the next hour planning. Kenny had all the tools we'd need in his van, remnants from his repo days that he'd never quite gotten around to returning. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be explained as a prank if we got caught. At 8:30, we drove to my neighborhood in Kenny's van. I knew Ellen Morrison would be watching from her kitchen window. She always was. But Ellen had never been a fan of Diana's affair. If anything, she'd probably enjoy the show. Theo's BMW was parked in my driveway like a black beetle gleaming under the streetlight. Through the living room window, I could see 2 figures moving around inside. My house, my living room, my wife. You sure about this? Kenny asked as we sat in the van, watching the house. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We waited until the lights in the living room dimmed. Then Kenny and I moved like shadows across the lawn I'd mowed every weekend for 23 years. The BMW was unlocked. Theo's arrogance extended to his personal security. Kenny popped the hood while I worked on the tires, not slashing them, just letting the air out slowly. Inconvenient, not criminal. Sugar in the gas tank is a myth, Kenny whispered as he worked. But a potato in the exhaust pipe? That's real science. While Kenny handled the mechanical sabotage, I took care of the aesthetic touches. A bar of soap across the windshield, home wrecker in large block letters, shaving cream on the door handles, plastic wrap over the exhaust pipe for good measure. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes. As we were finishing up, I saw a curtain twitch in Ellen Morrison's kitchen window. She was definitely watching, but instead of looking disapproving, she gave us a subtle thumbs up. Ellen's got your back, Kenny observed. Ellen's hated Diana since the day we moved in. Something about Diana's attitude toward the neighborhood kids. We slipped back to Kenny's van and drove to the end of the street, where we had a clear view of my house. Then we waited. At 11:47, the front door opened and Theo emerged, straightening his tie and looking pleased with himself. He walked to his car with the swagger of a man who thought he owned the world. The first sign of trouble was when he tried to open the driver's door and got a handful of shaving cream. The cursing started immediately, echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Diana appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe that I'd bought her for Christmas. What's wrong? Some asshole vandalized my car, Theo shouted, wiping shaving cream on his expensive pants. That's when he noticed the writing on the windshield. Even from our vantage point, Kenny and I could see his face turn red in the streetlight. Home wrecker? Diana read aloud. Oh my God, Theo, what if the neighbors see? The neighbors can kiss my ass, Theo snarled, but he was looking around nervously. Small-town gossip was a powerful force, and lawyers depended on their reputations. He tried to start the car. The engine turned over but immediately stopped. He tried again with the same result. By the third attempt, smoke was starting to seep from under the hood. Is it supposed to do that? Diana asked, her voice rising with panic. No, it's not supposed to do that. Theo popped the hood and immediately started coughing as more smoke billowed out. Someone sabotaged my engine! Kenny and I exchanged grins. The smoke was harmless, just a little oil on the manifold, but it looked dramatic as hell. Should we call the police? Diana asked. And tell them what? That the husband I'm cheating on got revenge? Theo slammed the hood shut. This is Patrick's work. I know it. You can't prove that. I don't need to prove it. I need to get my car fixed and figure out how to make him pay. They ended up calling a tow truck, which took 45 minutes to arrive. Kenny and I watched the whole show from our hiding spot, occasionally stifling laughter as Theo grew more and more agitated. This is better than cable, Kenny whispered. By the time the tow truck hauled away Theo's BMW, it was nearly 1 a.m. Diana had gone back inside, but not before having a heated argument with Theo on the front lawn that probably woke half the neighborhood. "What now?" Kenny asked as we drove back toward town. "Now we wait for them to make their next move. And Kenny, thanks for this. I know it was childish, but—" "Childish?" Kenny interrupted. "Pat, that was art. Pure, beautiful art." I dropped Kenny off at his apartment and drove back to my own place above the hardware store. As I climbed the stairs, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Cute prank, Patrick, but you just made this personal. You have no idea what you're messing with. T." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Looking forward to finding out." The response came immediately. "You will regret this." I set my phone on the nightstand and lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Theo and Diana would start to understand the magnitude of their mistake. The mortgage company would receive their first notice, and the 30-day countdown would begin. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. The call came at 9:23 a.m. on Thursday morning. I was on the Henderson construction site, reviewing blueprints with my crew, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of Theo's law firm, West, Patterson, and Associates. "Patrick Owen," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Mr. Owen, this is Theodore West. We need to talk." "Do we? About what?" There was a pause, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "I think you know exactly what this is about. There seems to be a problem with your mortgage." I made a show of sounding confused. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires immediate attention. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon?" "I'm working. Whatever this is about, you can discuss it with my lawyer." Another pause, longer this time. "You have a lawyer? Doesn't everyone?" I hung up without waiting for a response. 20 minutes later, Diana called. "Patrick, what have you done?" Her voice was tight with panic, all pretense of civility gone. "Good morning to you too, Diana. I'm fine, thanks for asking. Don't play games with me. Theo says there's something wrong with the mortgage, something about the house payment being due immediately." "Huh, that does sound like a problem. Fix it." The demand in her voice made me smile. This was the real Diana, the one who'd been hiding behind fake sweetness for years. "I don't think I can do that, sweetheart. See, according to the paperwork you filed, I don't live there anymore. I'm just a concerned citizen now." "Patrick, I'm warning you." "You're warning me? That's rich, coming from someone who changed the locks on her own husband." I let the silence stretch between us. "Have a great day, Diana. Say hi to Theo for me." I hung up and immediately called Marcus Gold, the lawyer I'd retained the day before. Marcus was everything Theo wasn't: quiet, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when the situation called for it. He'd been practicing law in Maine for 30 years, and he had a reputation for never losing a case he really wanted to win. "They're starting to panic," I told him. "Good. Panic makes people sloppy." Marcus's voice was dry as old paper. "I've reviewed the mortgage documents your daughter provided. This is going to be very unpleasant for them." "How unpleasant?" "The kind of unpleasant that ends careers and destroys reputations. Theo West should have read the fine print before he started playing house with your wife." That afternoon, I was installing drywall in the Henderson house when Kenny showed up with a grin that could have lit up Times Square. "You need to see this," he said, holding up his phone. It was a video from Ellen Morrison's Facebook page. The footage showed Theo and Diana having their argument on my front lawn the night before, complete with audio of Theo cursing about his vandalized car. Ellen had titled the post, "Neighborhood Drama When Lawyers Lose Their Cool." "It's got 43 shares already," Kenny said, "and the comments are brutal." I scrolled through the comments. Half the town seemed to be weighing in, and the consensus was not favorable to Diana and Theo. Words like homewrecker, cheater, and karma appeared frequently. "This is just the beginning," I told Kenny. "Wait until they figure out the mortgage situation." I didn't have to wait long. At 4:30, my phone rang again. This time it was Diana, and she was crying. "Patrick, please, we need to talk." I thought we were done talking. "The bank called. They want the full payment by next Friday. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." "We?" I let the word hang in the air. "Diana, there is no we anymore. You made that very clear when you had your boyfriend change my locks. This is our house, our life." "No, it was our house. Now it's your problem. I'll fight you on this. Theo says..." "Theo says what? That he's going to fix the legal mess he created? The same Theo who didn't bother to read the mortgage documents before he started playing house with my wife?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "You knew," Diana whispered. "You knew this would happen. I knew you'd eventually show your true colors. I just didn't know it would be this spectacular. Patrick, I'm begging you, don't do this." For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy. This was the woman I'd loved for over 2 decades, the mother of my daughter, the person I'd built a life with. Then I remembered the mocking text message, the sight of my belongings on the lawn, Theo's smug smile. "You should have thought about that before you decided to trade up," I said, and hung up. That weekend was Millbrook's annual Autumn Festival, a tradition that brought the whole town together for food, music, and gossip. I hadn't planned to attend, but Rina convinced me that showing my face would send the right message. "You can't hide," she said. "That makes you look guilty. You need to be visible, confident, like a man who has nothing to be ashamed of." She was right, of course. So Saturday afternoon found me walking through the festival grounds, shaking hands with neighbors and accepting condolences about my situation with Diana. The gossip mill was in full swing. Everyone had heard about the mortgage crisis, about Theo's vandalized car, about Diana's desperate phone calls to anyone who might lend them money. The town had chosen sides, and I was winning by a landslide. I was buying a funnel cake from Mrs. Patterson, no relation to Theo's law partner, when I spotted Diana across the crowd. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her face puffy from crying. She was talking animatedly to Sarah Jenkins, one of her former book club friends, but Sarah looked uncomfortable and kept glancing around as if looking for an escape route. "Poor thing," Mrs. Patterson said, following my gaze, "though I suppose she brought this on herself." "How do you mean?" "Well, everyone knew about her and that lawyer. She wasn't exactly discreet about it, bragging about her new boyfriend, showing off expensive gifts, talking about how she was going to upgrade her lifestyle." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "Pride goeth before a fall, as they say." I was about to respond when I heard raised voices from the direction of the beer tent. A crowd was gathering, and I could see Theo in the center of it, his face red with anger or alcohol or both. "This is bullshit!" Theo was shouting at anyone who would listen. "Patrick Owen is trying to steal my girlfriend's house." "Your girlfriend?" This came from Bob Henderson, my boss, and a man who'd known me for 15 years. "You mean his wife?" "Ex-wife. They're separated." "Separated by you, from what I hear," said another voice from the crowd. I pushed through the gathering crowd until I was standing about 10 feet from Theo. He saw me immediately, and his expression shifted from general anger to specific hatred. "There he is." Theo pointed at me with a beer bottle. "The man who's trying to destroy innocent people's lives." The crowd turned to look at me, and I could feel the weight of their expectations. This was my moment. I could either slink away like a beaten dog, or I could stand my ground and fight back. I chose to fight. "Innocent?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Theo, the only innocent thing about this situation is how innocent you were of the legal documents you were supposed to be reading." A few people in the crowd chuckled, and Theo's face got redder. "You sabotaged my car." "Did I?" That's a serious accusation. I hope you have proof. I don't need proof. Everyone knows it was you. Everyone knows a lot of things, I said, taking a step closer. They know you've been parking in my driveway twice a week for months. They know you changed the locks on my house. They know you convinced my wife to restructure our mortgage without bothering to read the fine print. That's not, Theo started, but I cut him off. They know you're about to lose your girlfriend's house because you're too arrogant to do your job properly. The crowd was murmuring now, and not in Theo's favor. He took a step toward me, his fists clenched. You want to settle this right here? He snarled. Settle what? The fact that you're a lawyer who can't read legal documents? Or the fact that you're sleeping with another man's wife? That's when Theo made his mistake. He swung the beer bottle at my head. I saw it coming from a mile away. 30 years of construction work had given me good reflexes, and Theo was drunk and clumsy. I stepped aside, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling forward into the pie-eating contest table. Theo went face first into a blueberry pie, sending purple filling flying in all directions. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause as he struggled to his feet, his expensive shirt covered in pie filling and his dignity in ruins. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to the crowd, I present Theo West, attorney at law, the man who's going to save my wife from her terrible husband. Even more laughter. Someone was recording with their phone, and I knew this would be all over social media within the hour. Theo wiped pie filling from his eyes and glared at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said. You're right, I replied. It's not, but it's about to be. That's when Diana appeared, pushing through the crowd with tears streaming down her face. She took one look at Theo, covered in pie and humiliation, and something inside her seemed to break. This is all your fault, she screamed at me. You've ruined everything. She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist easily. For a moment we stood there frozen, the entire crowd watching in silence. Diana, I said quietly, so only she could hear. You did this to yourself. All I did was let you. I released her wrist and walked away, leaving her and Theo standing there in front of half the town, covered in pie filling and shame. Behind me, I could hear the crowd beginning to disperse, their conversations buzzing with excitement about what they'd just witnessed. By tomorrow, everyone in Millbrook would know exactly what had happened at the autumn festival, and they'd all know who had won. The foreclosure notice was posted on the front door of my former house on Monday morning at exactly 8:47 a.m. I know the precise time because Ellen Morrison called me immediately. Patrick, you need to see this, she said, her voice crackling with excitement. There's a sheriff's deputy at Diana's house, and he's nailing something to the door. Is that so? Diana came running out in her bathrobe, screaming at the poor man. She's reading the notice now, and oh my lord, she just collapsed on the front steps. I was sitting in my office at the construction site, reviewing work orders and pretending this was just another ordinary Monday. But inside, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. What about Theo? I asked. His car's not there. Word is his law firm fired him on Friday after that video from the festival went viral. Apparently, clients don't like their attorneys getting into bar fights and losing. The video. Kenny had shown it to me over the weekend. Someone had posted it to YouTube with the title, Lawyer Gets Pied at Town Festival, and it had already gotten over 10,000 views. The comments section was brutal, with people from all over Maine weighing in on Theo's humiliation. Ellen, I said, you're a treasure. I'm just being a good neighbor. Someone needs to keep an eye on things. After I hung up, I called Marcus Gold. The foreclosure notice is posted, I told him. I know. I filed the paperwork myself this morning. Marcus sounded satisfied. They have exactly 14 days to come up with $237,000, plus penalties and interest. Current total is $251,847. And if they can't? Public auction on the courthouse steps. Everything goes, the house, the contents, even personal property if it's attached to the mortgage debt. Personal property? jewelry, cars, anything of value that was purchased with funds from the home equity line. Your wife was very thorough in documenting her spending habits. I thought about Diana's jewelry collection, her designer clothes, the expensive artwork Theo had been buying for the house, all of it purchased with money borrowed against our home's equity. Marcus, you're an evil man. I prefer thorough. That afternoon, Diana called me 17 times. I didn't answer any of the calls, but I listened to every voicemail. They started with anger. "This is insane, Patrick. You can't do this." Progressed to bargaining. "We can work this out, can't we? For Rina's sake?" And ended with desperation. "Please, Patrick, I'm begging you. Don't let them take everything." The 18th call came from Theo's number. "Patrick, this is Theo. We need to talk." "Do we?" "This has gone far enough. Diana is having a breakdown. She's talking about suicide." "That's unfortunate. You should probably get her some professional help." "Damn it, Patrick, she's still your wife." "Actually, according to the divorce papers you filed, she's not. She's just some woman who used to live in my house." "Don't be an asshole about this." "An asshole?" I let out a laugh. "Theo, you seduced my wife, convinced her to throw me out of my own home, and tried to steal everything I've worked for my entire life. And I'm the asshole? We can make a deal. Diana has some money saved, and I can get a loan." "Not interested." "What do you want? What's it going to take to make this go away?" I thought about it for a moment. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Or just to be left alone to rebuild my life? "I want you to understand something, Theo. This isn't about money. This isn't about the house. This is about consequences. You and Diana made choices, and now you get to live with the results." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get." The auction was scheduled for the following Friday at 10 a.m. By Wednesday, the entire town was talking about it. The local newspaper had picked up the story, running it under the headline, "Mortgage Mistake Leads to Foreclosure Drama." They'd interviewed several neighbors, including Ellen Morrison, who'd been happy to share her thoughts on Diana's comeuppance. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Diana, about the 23 years we'd spent together, about the good times before everything went wrong. Part of me, a small part, wondered if I was going too far. Then I remembered her text message. "Let's see how tough you are now, haha." I got dressed and drove to the house. It was nearly midnight, and the street was empty except for my truck. The foreclosure notice was still nailed to the front door, fluttering in the autumn wind like a flag of surrender. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see Diana sitting on the couch, surrounded by boxes. She was packing, probably trying to save what she could before the auction. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, human, real. Then Theo appeared, carrying a suitcase, and the moment passed. He saw my truck and said something to Diana. She looked out the window, and our eyes met across the darkness. I started the engine and drove away. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. I arrived at the courthouse at 9:30 to find a crowd already gathering. Word had spread beyond Millbrook, and there were people from neighboring towns who'd come to witness the spectacle. Diana and Theo were there, standing apart from the crowd like pariahs. Diana looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Her hair was stringy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. Theo looked better physically, but there was a defeated slump to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Marcus Gold appeared at my elbow. "Quite a turnout," he observed. "Small-town entertainment. They tried to get an emergency injunction yesterday. Judge threw it out. Apparently, Theo's reputation preceded him." The auctioneer was a thin man named Carlisle, who'd been conducting foreclosure sales in Maine for 20 years. He had the rapid-fire delivery of a tobacco auctioneer and the bedside manner of a tax collector. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carlisle announced, "we are here today for the public auction of 47 Maple Street, Millbrook, Maine, and all contents therein. Bidding will start at $150,000. I watched Diana's face as the bidding began. A local real estate investor opened at $150,000. Another investor countered with $160,000. The price climbed slowly, methodically, while Diana stood frozen like a statue. At $190,000, most of the bidders dropped out. At $200,000, it was down to two serious contenders. At $210,000, there was only one bidder left, a man I didn't recognize with a thick Boston accent. "Going once?" Carlyle called. "Going twice?" $220,000, I said. The crowd turned to stare at me. Diana's mouth fell open. Even Marcus looked surprised. "We have $220,000, Carlyle announced. "Do I hear $225,000? The Boston investor shook his head and walked away. The crowd was murmuring now, sensing drama. $220,000 going once, going twice, sold to bidder number 47. Just like that, I owned my house again. But the auction wasn't over. According to the foreclosure terms, all personal property purchased with home equity funds was also subject to sale. Diana's jewelry, her designer clothes, the expensive furniture Theo had bought, all of it had to go. I watched as Diana's diamond necklace sold for $800. Her wedding ring, the one I'd given her 23 years ago, went for $200 to a teenage girl who wanted it for prom. The leather sectional sofa that Theo had insisted on buying sold for $150. With each item sold, Diana seemed to shrink a little more. By the time they auctioned off Theo's vintage watch collection, she was openly crying. The final item was a painting Theo had bought for the bedroom, an abstract piece that had cost $3,000 and sold for $75 to Ellen Morrison, who announced her intention to donate it to the church rummage sale. When it was over, Diana and Theo had lost everything: the house, their possessions, their dignity, their future together. They stood in the courthouse parking lot looking like refugees from their own lives. I walked over to where they were standing. Theo saw me coming and instinctively stepped back, but Diana just looked at me with empty eyes. "Diana," I said quietly, "I want you to know something." She didn't respond, but I knew she was listening. "You could have had everything: the house, half my retirement, alimony, whatever you wanted. All you had to do was ask for a divorce, like a civilized human being." "Patrick," she started, but I held up my hand. "You chose to humiliate me instead. You chose to mock me, to throw me out like garbage, to parade your lover around in my home. You made this personal." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No, you're not. You're just sorry you got caught." I turned to Theo, who was staring at the ground like a scolded child. "And you," I said, "you're supposed to be a lawyer. You should have known better." "What happens now?" Theo asked. "Now? Now you get to start over with nothing, just like you tried to do to me. The difference is, I earned everything I lost. You just lost everything you tried to steal." I walked away, leaving them standing there in the courthouse parking lot. Behind me, I could hear Diana starting to cry again, but I didn't look back. Kenny was waiting for me at Murphy's Tavern, along with Rina and Ellen Morrison and half the town. Someone had decorated the bar with streamers and balloons, and Jimmy had put up a banner that read, "Welcome home, Patrick." "So," Kenny said, raising his beer in a toast, "how does it feel to be a homeowner again?" I looked around the bar at all the faces, friends, neighbors, people who'd known me my whole life. These were my people, my real family, and they'd stood by me when everything fell apart. "It feels like justice," I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it.